Assembly finished up around 9:30 or so on Friday night. The Senate finished up around 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. Used to be the other way around. Used to be the Assembly that was always there last. It's a welcome change from my point of view that we get out of there in what's still considered relatively civilized hours. It was a mixed year in the state legislature this year. We had both accomplishments and disappointments. Some of our major accomplishments included passage of an increase to the minimum wage, additional mandate relief for our localities, additional aid for education and infrastructure at the local level. We held hearings and we took important actions in response to Superstorm Sandy, Lee, and Irene, and we allowed our citizens, we put a provision in place that will allow our citizens to be heard on casino gambling. Those are some of the things that we accomplished. Some of the things that we didn't accomplish included a permanent minimum wage increase that would take the legislature out of the process by putting in a cost of living escalator. That was overruled by the Senate. We were not successful in moving forward on campaign finance reform or fair elections, two measures that passed the Assembly overwhelmingly but didn't get to see the light of day in the other house. Another and the most recent disappointment was the women's equality agenda. A 10-point agenda was developed by the governor, fairly consistent with measures that we in the Assembly have passed over the course of years but have not enjoyed support in the Senate. The Senate chose to only support 9 of those measures. The Assembly passed a bill that would support all 10. There's currently discussions about whether we will return to Albany at some point to further negotiate that particular agenda. But at this time, I can just tell you that it was a great disappointment to me and to many people who have been supporting the women's agenda all along that we came so close but were unable to secure a majority in the Senate. I understand that a majority failed by 1 vote in the Senate with every Republican, including those Republicans who consider themselves pro-choice, and 2 Democrats voting to keep the full measure from coming to the floor. We were also unsuccessful in advancing some very significant changes to our draconian drug laws. The drug laws in New York State are notorious, have been for 40-some years, for putting people behind bars who don't belong there while using up those valuable resources and keeping us from being able to have the facilities we need for the people who should be behind bars. In addition to that, our drug laws have locked up people with uneven and inappropriate laws. For example, the concealed carrying of marijuana for under 25 grams in New York State is a violation, not even a criminal matter. If that marijuana is exposed, it becomes a misdemeanor. That's a trick that has often been used by some law enforcement officials, particularly in New York City, to raise the level of the offense that the individual is going to be charged with by simply asking them to empty their pockets. We sought to change that technicality. Again, we couldn't get strong support in the Senate for it, therefore it didn't happen. On a more humane and maybe something more relevant to most of us level, and certainly to me and my family, is the passage of the medical use of marijuana, something that has been supported across the board by Democrats and Republicans alike. It doesn't take a liberal or a conservative to take a position on this subject. A number of people have taken the position, and where we've resolved is that it's time to allow for the compassionate use of medical marijuana. Once again, the Assembly passed that legislation. Once again, the Senate failed to do so. Let me just go over some of the local highlights of the 2013 budget very quickly. Locally, we were successful in doing a lot of work on Route 28. Bel Air got additional funding. The Catskill Mountain Rail Trail got additional funding, and old funding was continued from previous years that I had secured. The Catskill Interpretive Center, to be known as the Maurice D. Hinchy Catskill Interpretive Center, was assured of $1 million of support, and I'm told by the sponsors of that project that it will indeed be getting underway within the next several months. We increased aid to our school districts by a significant amount, almost completely making up. In most instances, we did make up and exceeded the cuts that we committed under the severe budget constraints that we were facing when we had to close consecutive budget deficits of over $10 billion. Also this year, I led the Assembly's effort to forge the transition to the Affordable Care Act. We are not the body that passed the Affordable Care Act, but we are the body that's responsible for implementing it, and I did all that I could to move that process forward. I'm very confident that we'll have as smooth a transition as possible. We can talk more about that later. In my role as insurance chair, I hosted a series of roundtables. These roundtables took place in the communities that were immediately impacted by Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy. And we started with a hearing in New York City where we took testimony and then conducted a series of 5 roundtables in the various places that were immediately impacted. We gathered a great deal of information from consumers, from insurance agents, from insurance adjusters, and from insurance companies. And in the course of those discussions, we were able to create a legislative package that passed the Assembly overwhelmingly, bipartisan support, and many times bipartisan sponsorship of those bills. They are sponsored in the Senate by Senator Seward, who represents a significant portion of our area, and we're looking forward to seeing passage, if not when the Senate returns, then perhaps next year. In addition to that, the federal government appears to be poised to let terrorism risk insurance expire. Terrorism risk insurance is extremely important to New York State in that after the September 11th disaster, many insurance companies said they could no longer insure the risk attendant with terrorism. It took reinsurance companies many years to get back on their feet, and many of them chose not to participate in the New York market and other markets that were directly impacted by terrorism. We are calling upon the federal government to reinstate that program because more than any state in the union, we are a terrorism target, and it's very important that we have access to that insurance so that we can continue to be the economic engine for the United States of America. We did many things in insurance. This was my first year there. I was previously the chair of the Energy Committee, but some of the other things that we got involved with was ending deceptive practices, and oftentimes at the prompting of local governments and state governments, of certificates of insurance. Certificates of insurance are documents that people get in order to prove that they have insurance. In many instances, insurance agents were being asked to provide certificates of insurance that went beyond the actual coverage of the policy, or being told that if they didn't provide that additional information on a certificate of insurance, they would take their business elsewhere. Unscrupulous insurance agents would go ahead and go complete that information. Now we're going to prohibit that package, that approach, and we're also going to prohibit people from asking for things they know are not part of their insurance policy in order to deceive some third party. In addition, speaking of modernizing, there's a practice, if any of you have purchased a used car and you're seeking to get collision insurance on it, you know that if you don't go out to a place and get a picture taken in 12 days, your insurance is automatically canceled. It's just canceled. No explanation, no further discussion, your insurance is automatically canceled. We're ending that practice. Insurance companies told us they didn't need those photos in the modern age when there's an enormous availability of data out there that could be used. So we're eliminating that practice, and now with Senate passage and the governor's signature, you can be secure that when you go to your insurance agent and buy your car insurance on your used car, that in fact you are covered. Locally, again, probably the measure which got the most attention, not just locally but nationwide, was a simple measure honoring a local citizen. We took Route 375 that extends from Route 28 into Woodstock, and we asked my colleagues to allow us to rename that the Levon Helm Memorial Boulevard. I have to tell you that I didn't consider it to be the most important piece of legislation that I had to offer this year, or that I was involved with this year, but I was overwhelmed by the warmth of the response of the public to this measure and the uniformly supportive comments that we've received, both privately and publicly. The governor signed that into law 2 or 3 days before the session was over. We expect to have a ceremony soon where we'll unveil a sign. I got my fingers crossed that it's one of those fancy Catskill Park signs that exist only in the Catskill Park with the beautiful mountains on top and the nice brown and white lettering that will be consistent with Levon's respect and appreciation for nature. It may sound like a little thing, it may actually be a little thing, but it will also be a lasting legacy of this great person who contributed the 10, what he considered bonus years of his life after he was diagnosed with what was otherwise considered a fatal cancer, to reinvigorating the music reputation of Woodstock, bringing back world-class musicians to our community. and really enlightening a number of people about the plight of farmers, particularly the kind of farmers we have in our area who are struggling to get by in a modern economy. So we're very proud of that. That together with the Mountain Close Scenic Byway Act and all the other measures that we did along the Route 28 corridor that I mentioned earlier really holds great promise for what happens in the future along those roads, and also reaffirms our pride in our area. Net metering, I'll go quickly. The net metering laws that I was instrumental in passing initially when I was chair of the Energy Committee needed some tinkering. And we were successful this year in passing legislation that would expand net metering laws from their current ability to allow people to finance energy efficiency measures to now being able to actually finance energy producing measures, solar panels, I could go through the whole list here. There are fuel cells, farm digesters, solar, electric, wind, micro combined heat power will all be added to Green Jobs, Green New York technology that will be eligible for low interest loans, and the on-bill recovery program that will eliminate the front-end costs that prevent so many people from participating in those programs. Another local measure we participated in this year was enabling the towns of Marbletown, Rochester, and Rosendale to combine their headquarters for things like their town courts. We were requested by those towns to advance this legislation. They are now discussing in those various municipalities how exactly they intend to implement that. The Rosendale school closed, and it was a great tragedy for the community. This is a response by the community leaders in those three towns to try to make something good from something that was otherwise started out not so good, and to also save the taxpayers a significant amount of money. Another measure we passed that will save the taxpayers of the town of Ulster a significant amount of money was a request from the town supervisor, Mr. Quigley, that we allow for a rollover of bond anticipation notes. That will allow the town of Ulster to stretch out their payments to go seek a lower and a better interest rate and to save municipal taxpayers a great deal of money. I always look forward to working with my local leaders, particularly when we can do so in a cooperative way, in a way that represents an intelligent approach to the issues and represents fairness for all the taxpayers. And these two measures that I just mentioned did that. The move-over laws that I was instrumental in passing last year are now expanded to include any vehicles on the side of the road that have emergency lights on. If you see a vehicle on the side of the road and it's exhibiting emergency lights, the message to you as a driver in New York is to move over and give that person safety. Everybody deserves safety. This amendment will provide that for all. Minimum wage, medical marijuana, the constitutional amendment on casinos that will go before the voters. In addition to the constitutional amendment on casinos, there are some things of local interest. 4 casinos will be allowed under legislation separately passed, should the public agree that casinos should be allowed in New York State. We believe that our area, the Catskill Mountain region, has a very good chance of housing 2 of those casinos. In addition to providing for 4 casinos to be in New York State, we also laid out a significant package of local government input, and most significantly a sharing of local revenues, a very generous sharing of local revenues with the municipalities that will be hosting these casinos. So now it's in the hands of the voters. They can decide what to do. If they do, there may be some significant construction taking place here in Ulster County. There may be some significant revenue being generated by these casinos in the long term. And there may be new hope for our Catskills area resorts that haven't seen the kind of opportunity they're looking at now since the advent of air travel that took many of their patrons to Las Vegas. So we're really looking forward to having consideration of that, although it's quite clear that it's not certain how that will be considered on the ballot, because quite honestly the public is divided 50-50 on how they feel about it. Startup New York was the economic development program that many people have heard of called Tax-Free New York. Tax-Free New York was originally intended to place industrial facilities on our college campuses. The final product, Startup New York, is significantly modified from that to include such things as allowing for businesses such as Tech City to host some of the facilities upon permission of a regional board that it serves the local economic needs. I was not supportive of this program when it was just on our college campuses. I did support the final measure, which offers a new lifeline to underused commercial and industrial facilities like Tech City, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with that. Overall, as I said, it was a mixed session. There were many, many accomplishments, many achievements, and there were some disappointments. I'm hopeful that the legislature can reconvene to take up some of those measures that are still unfinished. I'm hoping that we can see some progress done. I'm hoping also that we can see the Senate become functional. It is currently not. The last several days of session, I don't know how many of you were paying attention, but the Senate itself didn't even meet to pass bills for 2 days of the last week of session. And when they did, they rushed them through in the middle of the night. On the subject of the Senate, it has been a new and a very rewarding experience for me to work with new colleagues as our local representatives. Senator James Seward and I, who not only share several towns together in our representation, also share, we're co-chairs of the insurance committees in our respective houses. The opportunity to work with Senator Cecilia Kachik and Senator Terry Gibson across the river has been an invaluable one. And Terry and I are already drafting legislation to address some local issues that are really very important to us, and that is dealing with tick-borne diseases. In addition to that, Senator Kachik and I have been involved in a number of initiatives, and we've also reached out to the community together. It is thoroughly refreshing to have that opportunity in the state legislature, and I look forward to more of it in the future. So with that, I will conclude. I think we can have a written copy of the statement that you've all been given or will be given, and if there are any questions regarding that, I would be more than happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
Please address the sales tax issue.
Well, before we get to the sales tax, does anybody have any questions about the state agenda that I just went over?